The tennis world held its breath as Alex Eala walked off the court at the Steffi Graf Stadion in Berlin. Her remarkable Cinderella run, one of the most electric and unexpected stories of the entire grass season, had come to an emotional end in the semi-finals. Linda Noskova, the powerful Czech world number 13, had been too consistent, too aggressive, too relentless on the day. The scoreline read 6-2, 6-4. The match lasted just 69 minutes. And for 69 minutes, a nation on the other side of the world had watched with hearts clenched, hoping the story would have a different ending. It didn't. Not today. But here's the thing about Alex Eala that the scoreboard could never fully capture. She did not walk off that court in Berlin defeated in the way that word is usually understood. She walked off it as a wild card who had just beaten the world number 2, toppled the world number 8, and reached the semi-finals of a WTA 500 event for the very first time in her career. She walked off it having earned prize money, ranking points, and something far more valuable than either. Momentum. The kind that does not reset overnight. The kind that travels with you. And instead of going home, she went to Bad Homburg. Less than 48 hours after the final point was played in Berlin, Alex Eala arrived at the Bad Homburg Open carrying something that caught everyone in the tennis world off guard. Not exhaustion, though she had every right to be exhausted. Not frustration, though the loss still had to sting. What she carried with her, visibly, unmistakably, was determination. A quiet, focused, burning kind of determination that the people around her recognized immediately and that the cameras could not help but find. Players who had watched her leave Berlin stopped and looked twice. Coaches who had been paying attention all grass season leaned in a little closer. The questions started almost immediately. What had she done to recover so quickly? How does a 21-year-old absorb a painful semi-final defeat and reappear 48 hours later looking like one of the most dangerous players in the draw? The answer, for anyone who had been following her story properly, was not complicated at all. This is simply who Alex Eala is. She had arrived in Berlin as a wild card. Nobody expected what followed. She opened her campaign against Anna Vekic, the Belgian who had just won the Queen's Club title the week before, and dismantled her 7-5, 6-4. Then came Elena Rybakina, the world number 2, one of the most formidable servers in the women's game, a former Wimbledon champion. Alex beat her too, in straight sets, in the round of 16. Then came Elena Svitolina in the quarterfinals, the world number 8, a former top 3 player with a career full of Grand Slam deep runs and Olympic experience. Alex beat her 6-3, 6-4, breaking her serve 5 times and finishing with 19 winners against just 9 unforced errors. It was, by any reasonable measure, a masterclass. After the Svitolina win, Alex stood on court and spoke into the microphone with a smile that carried equal parts disbelief and joy. She said she could not believe it. She said she was in shock. She said she had been watching Elena Svitolina since she was a kid, studying her game, learning from her from the other side of a television screen. And now she had just defeated her on a grass court in Germany at a WTA 500 tournament. The words came out like someone who had not yet fully processed what she had just done. The semi-final against Noskova told a different story. The Czech was too big, too accurate, too locked in on the day. She fired 9 aces. She won nearly 83% of her first serve points. She broke Alex 3 times in the first set alone and never allowed the match to become the kind of scrappy, momentum-shifting battle that might have suited the Filipinas' strengths. When Alex fought back in the second set, winning 3 consecutive games to take a 4-3 lead and make the crowd believe something special was still possible, Noskova responded immediately. She won the next 3 games. She served it out. The match was over in 69 minutes. Alex Eala fell to 1-14 in matches against Czech opponents on the professional tour. The curse, if you can call it that, remained unbroken. Noskova had now beaten her twice, at Indian Wells and in Berlin, without dropping a set. The numbers told a story that was hard to argue with. And yet, the bigger number, the one that mattered most for what came next, was this. Alex Eala had climbed from world number 35 to world number 30 through her Berlin run alone. She had surged inside the top 32. She had secured her place in the seedings at Wimbledon. She had become the first Filipino tennis player in history to earn a single seed at a Grand Slam tournament. No Filipino player had ever been where she was now standing. Not one. In the entire history of the sport. And she had done it as a wild card in a tournament where almost nobody expected her to win more than a match or two. When she arrived at Bad Homburg, all of that was behind her. Not forgotten, not dismissed, but processed and filed away in the place where athletes store the things that fuel them. She was not thinking about Berlin. She was thinking about what came next, about Wimbledon, looming on the calendar like the biggest thing she had ever been asked to walk toward, about June 29th, about the All England Club, about what it would mean to step onto those grass courts not as a qualifier, not as a wild card, but as a seeded player. The first Filipino player ever to do so. But before Wimbledon, there was Bad Homburg. And Bad Homburg came with its own storyline. The singles draw had placed Alex against Elise Mertens in the round of 32. Mertens, the experienced Belgian ranked 24th in the world, had beaten Alex in Madrid just 2 months earlier in a match that was never particularly close. Mertens had controlled it from the first game to the last, exposing the gap between where Alex was and where she wanted to be. That defeat had been instructive, but it had also been painful. And now, on a grass court in Germany, with Wimbledon less than 2 weeks away, they were going to play each other again. But the doubles draw, when it was released, created a noise that almost drowned out everything else. Next to Alex Eala's name in the doubles competition appeared a name that stopped people mid-scroll. A name that required no context, no explanation, no introduction anywhere on the planet. Venus Williams. 7 Grand Slam singles titles. 5 Wimbledon championships. A career that had stretched across 3 decades and reshaped what was possible for women in professional tennis. A player who had walked into tournaments when the world was not yet fully ready for her and had forced the world to adjust. A competitor who had played through setbacks that would have ended most careers and had kept coming back, again and again, with the same ferocity and grace that had made her one of the most beloved and respected figures the sport had ever produced. And now her name was next to Alex Eala's in a doubles draw at Bad Homburg. The internet did not take this news quietly. Fans in the Philippines, already riding the emotional wave of Alex's Berlin run, were overwhelmed. One person wrote that Venus Williams was a legend and that seeing her partner with Alex felt like something out of a dream. Another wrote that seeing a young girl from the Philippines standing beside Venus Williams on one of tennis's biggest stages was almost too much to process. Others called it a full-circle moment, a torch being passed, a meeting of everything the sport had been and everything it was becoming. They were not wrong. Earlier in the season, Alex had spoken openly about what the Williams sisters meant to her. She had described Venus as a trailblazer, someone whose influence on women's tennis extended so far beyond titles and trophies that it was difficult to put a number on it. She had talked about watching the Williams sisters as a child, studying their power and their precision, trying to understand what had made them not just great players but transformative ones. She had said all of this while imagining, perhaps, that sharing a court with one of them one day was the kind of dream that lived at the very edge of possibility. Now it was not a dream. It was scheduled. Their opening doubles match against Alexandra Osborne and Catherine Harrison was set for Tuesday, not before 5 in the afternoon Manila time. And from the moment the pairing was announced, it was one of the most talked about doubles matchups of the entire tournament. Tennis analysts could not stop writing about the dynamic. On one side of the partnership stood Venus, 46 years old, carrying decades of accumulated knowledge about how to compete at the highest level, how to handle pressure, how to read opponents and adjust in real time, how to stay present when the spotlight is at its most intense. On the other stood Alex, 21 years old, in the middle of the breakthrough season of her career, still discovering the full dimensions of what she was capable of, still learning what it meant to compete week after week at this level without blinking. Experience beside ambition. History beside the future. Every point they played together would carry something larger than the score. For Alex, the opportunity was about more than doubles results or ranking points. It was the chance to learn directly from someone she had admired from across the world for most of her life. The lessons that could pass between them in practice sessions, in the huddles between games, in the conversations about positioning and tactics and how to think on grass, those lessons were not something you could find in a coaching manual. They came from someone who had won 5 Wimbledon titles and knew exactly what the grass at the All England club demanded of a player. While the doubles partnership captured headlines, Alex's singles campaign was writing its own statement. She stepped onto the Bad Homburg court against Elise Mertens and delivered something that left very little room for doubt. A straight sets victory. Decisive. Convincing. Clean. The scoreboard said what needed to be said, and it said it in a way that rewrote the recent history between them. The player who had been controlled and exposed in Madrid 2 months earlier was not the player who showed up in Bad Homburg. The movement was sharper. The shot selection was calmer. The belief in herself was visible in every point she played, from the first game to the last. The significance of the win went beyond revenge, beyond a simple correction of a previous result. It was validation at a moment when the tennis world was watching most closely. Critics who had wondered quietly whether Alex's Berlin run was a peak moment rather than a new baseline suddenly had fewer arguments to work with. She had not faded after Berlin. She had continued. She had arrived at another tournament on the back of a heartbreaking semi-final loss and beaten a top 30 player with authority. Rankings continued to move in her direction. Before the grass season began, she had been sitting outside the top 30. Now she was inside it and climbing. The Wimbledon seeding was already secured. The world number was approaching her career high. Every match she had played since Birmingham had added another layer of evidence to the case she was building, not just about her ability on grass, but about her ability to sustain, to absorb setbacks and keep going, to compete at the highest level of women's tennis and not be overwhelmed by it. Throughout all of it, one thing had remained constant at the center of everything she did. She had often spoken about what it meant to represent the Philippines on a global stage, about the responsibility she carried when she stepped onto a court wearing that flag, about the millions of people watching from Manila, from Quezon City, from every corner of the archipelago, who had turned on their phones and their televisions in the middle of the night because a girl from their country was playing tennis against the best players in the world. She carried that with her everywhere. Not as a burden, though it was heavy. As a purpose. From Birmingham, where she had won the WTA 125 title to begin her grass season, to Berlin, where she had beaten a former world number 2, a former top 3, and reached the semi-final of a WTA 500 as a wild card, to Bad Homburg, where she had partnered with one of the most iconic players in tennis history and beaten the player who had beaten her in Madrid. Every stop on this grass court journey had been a chapter in a story that was still being written. And now the final chapter of this particular arc was approaching. June 29th. The All England Club, Wimbledon, the most prestigious tennis tournament in the world. The event that every player in the draw had been thinking about since the grass season began. The one that carries 140 years of history in its grounds and in its traditions and in the specific kind of silence that falls over center court in the moments before a match begins. Alex Eala was not arriving at Wimbledon simply hoping to participate. She was not arriving as a name in the draw who might cause an upset in the early rounds before the inevitable happened. She was arriving as a seeded player, as a genuine contender, as someone who had spent the last 3 weeks proving, match by match, win by win, that she belonged in the conversation about who the dangerous players at this tournament really were. She was no longer just a rising star with a powerful forehand and an inspiring backstory. She was a player whose ranking reflected real results against elite competition. A player who had beaten 2 top 10 players in the same week. A player whose game had demonstrably evolved on grass in ways that made her uncomfortable to face for opponents at any level of the draw. Walking into the All England Club as a seeded player for the first time in her career was going to mean something that no scoreline could fully express. It was history. It was the culmination of every cracked court in Quezon City, every ranking point fought for and won against players with more resources and more support and more of everything the sport usually requires. It was the proof of something that had been true for a long time, but that the whole world was only now beginning to understand properly. The grass was waiting, perfectly manicured, immaculate in a way that only Wimbledon can achieve. The stakes had never been higher. The pressure had never been greater. The attention had never been more focused on her name and her story. And Alex Eala was not afraid. The grass season was still alive. Bad Homburg was still unfolding. Wimbledon was just ahead. And through all of it, the one constant had never changed. She was not finished. She had never been finished. She had simply been building one match at a time, one tournament at a time, towards something that the whole world was now beginning to see clearly. The story was still being written. And the best chapters, the ones that would be remembered long after the scores faded, were still ahead.